Hello, and welcome to another edition of Devin Reads from Van Richten's Monster Hunter's Compendium. Fun fact, when you hold it up to the camera, it's backwards there. It'll be right side up when you see it anyway. Today's reading is from Volume 3, Section the 3rd, Witches. During my travels through the many domains of our shadow-haunted world, I have encountered many people and cultures. I have heard prayers to gods in many different languages, and I have learned that allies in the fight against darkness are found almost everywhere. The origin of this text is twofold, and I was provided much of the insights within its page by two very different women, one whose entire existence is devoted to spreading hate and chaos, and one whose life revolves around helping others and combating the first. The process that led to the writing of this text started 5 years ago. I had been grievously wounded in battle against one of the ancient dead, and a magical rotting disease was claiming what health I had left. More dead than alive, I reached the Hospice of Healing Hands in southern Valakin, I'm guessing that's how it's pronounced. There, I spent the next few months being nursed back to health under the gentle ministrations of the priestess. Reset. Under the gentle ministrations of the priestesses of Hala who operated. Unlike what some ranking members of the Church of Ezra will have you believe. Ezra? As deity names go, Ezra. It doesn't have a lot of gravitas feels like the wrong, gravitas is probably the right word. I just wish I had a word that sounded less pretentious. It doesn't have a lot of gravitas to it. It doesn't have a lot of punch to it, you know? The Church of Ezra, unlike what some ranking members of the Church of Ezra will have you believe, there's nothing evil or unwholesome about those who serve the goddess Hala. They are pious folk who are devoted to easing pain and suffering in our land. We can use more of their kind, I believe. However, I did learn that at least one of the common accusations that adherents of Ezra frequently level at those who serve Hala is true. The Church of Hala does have a secret face, although the secrecy is forced on it by the zealousness of Ezra's followers. So, yeah, Ezra's followers may say a lot, but I think that Hala is better than Ezra. Anyway, while recovering at the hospice, I became very good friends with Sister Marina, a likable and intelligent woman whose knowledge of the supernatural evils that plague our land surprised me. Why did it surprise you, Van Richten? She's a priestess, she deals a lot with healing people. She probably knows a lot of things. I feel like it's kind of judgmental for you to assume she doesn't. My family is devoted to the battle against evil, just as you are, Dr. Van Richten, she said. For generations, we have been maintaining a record of that struggle, a struggle that has mostly been conducted in secret. I am the latest keeper of the archives, so I am most familiar with them. Needless to say, I was intrigued. She received permission from the head of the hospice to allow me to enter their archives. Here I found not only cures for a great many maladies, but chronicles of battles against liches and vampires that span generations. Most of the battles, however, were against creatures to which I had devoted little thought. Anise, green hags, and sea hags. It's like the ocean, not as in A, B, and C. I knew these evil magical monsters were a menace, but I was unaware of how great that menace was until I read their annals. They described a war that Sister Morena's family had quietly waged against their foul breed for centuries, starting in lands far away from the domains that she calls home and continuing to this very day. Or at least to 5 years ago when he saw their archives. It probably continues, but he doesn't know for certain. Making assumptions, Van Richten. The record of bravery and scholarship was vast. For her forebears, she had forebears? Were meticulous in recording their observations and experiences while battling hags. From their notes, I realized that hags might be a far greater problem than I had imagined. Your imagination can be a little limited, Rudy. A little limited. I had viewed them as isolated oddities, not the kind of pervasive, tenacious, and organized evil that they were now shown to be. Aside from a clear image of hags, I became aware of something else while reading Morena's family history and records. It became clear to me that while they all served the Church of Hala, they also seemed to be part of another group. One that they assumed the reader knew, and thus was referred to only obliquely. It seemed to be a form of magical society, but one into which they were born or married, and one that was divided between the sexes, with males and females practicing different kinds of magic. It's a little cis-centric there. I asked Morena about this because I had certainly never observed such division in the Church of Hala. She then brought me into the presence of the hospice's high priest. In his study were copies of all my books, and he said that as a fellow champion of good, he permitted me to learn a special secret shared by many at the hospice. A little full of yourself there, Rudy. Sister Morena then revealed that she and many other of the priestesses there were, in fact, witches. Quotation marks. And the 3 priests present were warlocks. I put quotes around the terms, for they're how they themselves refer to each other, even though they have little in common with the typical malign visions that such terms conjure up. No, the witches and warlocks that Morena is part of are actually a rare group of humans. Okay, now you're just getting racist. Where wizards gain their powers through hard study and priests gain their magic through devotion to their gods, witches and warlocks like Morena are born to harness their unique brand of magic. They must be taught how to wield their power, oh my goodness. Sorry. They must be taught how to wield their power, but they are truly a breed apart from most other magic users in our domain. I continued my study of hags and other creatures in the hospice's archives while I recuperated. Morena and her fellow witches also honored me by granting me insight into their culture and ways. I was about to return to my home in Mordenshire, content in the fact that I had found another ally in my fight, as well as another source of academic information, when an elf wizard named Fiore arrived at the hospice. She was engaged in a battle against a green hag, and I joined her endeavor. From there, I resolved to do a more complete study of these evil creatures, with an eye towards publishing another guide. I traveled to Tepest, a land reputed to be home to several hags and hag coveys, unions of 3 hags that have bonded in order to wreak more havoc than they can individually. Teamwork makes the dream work, and sometimes that dream is a nightmare. But it was in northern Nova Vasa that I gained most of my insight. It was there that I confronted the... I apologize. It was there that I was confronted with a green hag who lured me to her with her ability to mask her true form in a more pleasing illusion. Samine, the green hag's name, said that through divinatory magic she had watched my battle against the Valakan covey. I was impressed with you, Van Richten, she told me. I suspected that your writings were little more than a collection of tall tales, but I underestimated you. Now that you have seen firsthand the evil that my kind represents, you will undoubtedly want to take up arms against us and write one of your books, yes? Okay, so I'm like 2 pages into this particular version, and twice now Van Richten has been like, hey, you know, people read my stuff. It's pretty great. Come on, Rudy. Rein in the ego a little. I have not lately been one to shy away from the face of evil. I boldly told her that she had described... Wow, that sentence unfortunately my Van Richten was getting a little bit too close to, what's his name? Zap Brannigan, so I need to rein that in a little bit. I boldly told her that she had described exactly what I intended, which is a really long way to say, I said yes. Her response surprised me. Good, she said. I will tell you all I know about my kind. You can verify the truth of what I tell you with your little friends of the Helian Hands Coven. Thus I spent a very educational week in the company of Samine. By the time we parted company, Samine had filled in several blanks that the archives of the Helian Hands had left in my knowledge, and she had given me great insight into the psychology of hag kind. I made it clear to her that if we met again, we should consider each other enemies. Despite her helpfulness, she was still evil. In fact, she admitted that the very act of her helping me proved she was evil. I'm helping you destroy my own kind, Van Richten, she said with a cackle. I consider the time we've spent together and the acts you are going to perform my crowning achievements. You see, I have as much contempt for my kind as I do for you and yours. I take delight in helping you kill us, and I'll take delight in my miserable sisters or I managing to kill you instead. I mean, that's pretty straight up evil, because honestly, what it's probably doing is it's going to motivate a lot of adventurers who are going to read Rudy's book and like throw themselves into a fight against hags, probably before they're ready, and get themselves killed. Heads up, Windmill Crew, let's not do that. Simeon's attitude is not untypical of hag kind in general, except for her hatred of her own kind. From where that odd attitude stems, I cannot say. This destructive bent is why hags must be stopped. If we do not, they may eventually kill us all. Blah, 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 blah. About this book, loyal readers will notice that this book, again, because, okay, yeah, thanks. Third page, third mention of, oh yay, everybody reads my books. Only half of this volume deals with these creatures, the other half describes the witches and warlocks who dwell at the Hospice of Healing Hands, as well as other head magicians who reside in remote corners of our domains. I felt it important to provide you, my readers, with the ability to distinguish these obscure and secretive spellcasters, most of who are harmless and may even share your goals and desires to rid our land of evil, from hags. It's all too easy for an overzealous hunter to make just such a mistake, going from a hunter to murderer. I do not want to be responsible for such mistakes. Okay, first off, hags are pretty... Okay, let's look at hags here. All right, that's a hag. Are you gonna mistake just a regular spellcaster for a hag? I really hope not. I really, really hope not. I hope for better from you. Random person watching me on YouTube in Ravenloft. You get Ravenloft. You get YouTube in Ravenloft, right? This first chapter is actually pretty long. But you know what? I'm going to read through some of it. Because it goes... Oh my goodness. Jesus Christ, Rudolph. How did you... What? Okay, so in my last video, I read the first chapter of his vampires one, right? That was what I read? I believe I did. Which was... Chapter 1 started on page 10, ended on page 15. So, this was chapter 1 on vampires. Oh, there we go. Aiming at the camera. Chapter 1 on hags. "40 damn pages." I will say this for Rudolf Van Richten, he does not get less verbose in his age. So I'm going to read some of this. I'm going to read about 15 minutes. Not all of it. That's going to... Yeah, all right. Chapter 1, Hags and Their Kind. Anyone who survived an encounter with a hag probably asked the same questions as Brother Seth of the Order of Healing Hands did in a personal letter to me. Where did these foul mockeries of women who term themselves hags first come from? Can anyone but the gods truly say? And why did not the gods slay their evil breed as it lay in the cradle of creation? By Holla the Caregiver, I cannot fathom which god would be so vengeful or mad so as to visit this plague upon us. This first chapter serves as a primer to the three most common types of hags, the anise, green hag, and sea hag, as well as touching briefly on the legendary night hag and undead spectral hags. I mean, I'm just gonna say, editions change, hags change. This is a good guide, but it doesn't necessarily promise anything. Even those of us who have spent much of their lives destroying villainous creatures such as vampires find ourselves revolted by the carnage a hag may leave in her wake, are stunned to silence when we begin to realize just how unnatural these monstrous crones are. Like, I feel like it's a little rude. It's a little, like, judgmental. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's, I feel like it's downplaying the shit that vampires can do. Like, you're making a lot of excuses for vampires here, Rudolph. Hags pose a danger as great as vampires or werebeasts. However, they're far more difficult to hunt, and the would-be hunter must be twice as vigilant in researching the foe before striking. Why? Hags are insidious creatures who can hide among humanity so effectively that in many cases it is easy to assume that a woman who may just be an innocent eccentric is actually a hag. Like, definitely do some fucking research. As you will find in this chapter, hags go through at least two distinct life stages, with an event that they refer to as the change separating the stages. In almost every way, hags who are early in their lives, before the change, are indistinguishable from human females. They are a type of humanoid impersonator who, for the first part of their lives, live among humans, nearly always completely unaware themselves of their true nature. As they enter what for human beings is the latter half of their lives, they shed their human appearance during the change and then stand revealed as anise, green hags, or sea hags. As will become clear, a woman who is strong-minded and independent, who has chosen to pursue what many may view as a masculine career, or who is a tragic victim of circumstance and unable to bear children, may be mistaken as an immature hag by overzealous adventurers who fail to back up their conclusions with careful research and intelligent deductions. I worry that my judgmental look is not getting across to you, Rudolph Van Richten. In my lifetime, I've met many a woman who is barren or who is more comfortable wielding a sword than a knitting needle. The majority of them have been brave and completely mortal souls, even the ones who would oppose me in my tasks and research. I do not want my words to be used by foolish people who fault young women for leading a more independent lifestyle than many consider socially appropriate. The evils of hags is difficult enough to contain and recognize without those who would battle it being blinded by cultural prejudice. So, as in my other books, I once again urge those readers who feel inclined to take up arms against the creatures of darkness to do so with great care. In the case of hags, I offer this admonition not only for the safety of adventurers, but in order to protect innocents from harm. So, I mean, the question is, Rudy, are you just making it more dangerous by talking about hags before the change, where they are completely harmless? Like, if they're just typical women before the change hits them, is there any point in addressing that portion of their life at all? It's not like you can root them out beforehand. I mean, it's yeah. It just seems like by discussing how this situation exists, you are spreading a certain superstition that's going to cause problems for women as they go on. Like, it's a question of origin. Excuse me. More so than for any other creature I have thus far attempted to study, the origin of hags is a perplexing question. With vampires, the answer seems to be that the roots lie in a parasitic infection transferred by their bite or a divine curse. But you've also talked about how nobody knows where vampires really come from, where they originally came from. Ghosts arise through an unusual strength of will on the part of dying beings. Typically, werebeasts are either the result of what some of my colleagues refer to as a evolution, a natural trait that develops in a species so that it can survive or flourish, or through a magical parasitic infection that has become so prevalent in the population that it is considered natural. Mummies and other ancient dead grow most often from fervent religious beliefs and a blessing or curse of one or more gods. Liches and the creations, commonly and somewhat inaccurately referred to as golems, are the product of deep and unhealthy obsessions with power or objects of desire. I mean, liches, yes. I don't know. Okay, all right. I will admit I don't know that much about the created in Ravenloft, so I'm not. Yeah, okay. With hags, it's far more difficult to form a theory of the origin that has any validity. Unlike vampires, liches, mummies, and golems, hags are living beings. Unlike werebeasts, hags do not represent a species, but instead propagate themselves by mating with human males. There are also magical means through which hags can breed, but those are rare. How can a species with exclusively female characteristics exist for long with no male counterpart? Through my research, I've settled on two theories, either of which seems equally likely to me. One is favored by the hags themselves and may be more myth than truth, while the other is based on the known existence of other rare species that do not seem to have two sexes. Divine influence. Sebine, the green hag who assisted greatly in the creation of this book, told me the creation story that she claims many hags themselves believe. She said it first heard it from a hag who helped her understand her nature following the change. She's heard it from other hags since. Sebine also claimed to be familiar with at least one hag covey that retells the tale to one another every full moon. Long ago, there lived a woman whose name was Lurin. Her entire life was devoted to her husband and her children. She raised her 3 sons and worked the family farm, even as her husband spent his days at the local tavern getting intoxicated with his crude friends. One day, her husband returned from town with a young woman of beauty so radiant it made Lurin's heart ache to look on her. Lurin had been beautiful once, but the hard life she had led for her husband robbed her of that beauty. She was all too aware of this, and as was her husband. "Begone, you hideous crone," he told her. "I have a new wife, a young wife. You are cast out, for you have become too old and too ugly." Lurin begged her husband to reconsider. When he would not, she turned to her 3 sons and begged them to help her. They refused. "You have grown old and ugly, mother," they said. "Father's new wife will serve us as well as you have, even better in fact, because she is pleasing to the eye while you are not." And so Lurin was driven from her home. Never mind. So Lurin was driven from her home. She wandered through the dark and wild forest until her strength gave out. As she lay in the forest grove, she cried out to the heavens for the power to avenge herself against those who had used her and thrown her away for something as superficial as physical appearance. She prayed for the strength to avenge not only herself, but every other woman who had ever been so slighted. Lurin's cries were heard, and the goddess Hala responded to her pain. As Hala is wont to do, she eased Lurin's pain and gave her the means to avenge herself, blessing her with all the ability that hags display today. With her newfound power, Lurin enslaved the evil creatures of the forest, forcing them to serve her as she had served her ungrateful family. Then she set about exacting her revenge. Lurin returned to her home and masked her withered visage in an illusion so beautiful that she caused her husband and sons to drive out the girl who had become his new wife. Lurin secretly captured the girl and held her captive in the nearby forest. She then slew her husband and devoured him. Lurin's oldest son, a mighty warrior, thought that his father had abandoned them, so he took Lurin to be his wife, seduced by her great beauty. As they shared their bed on their wedding night, she revealed her true form and slew and devoured him. She had become pregnant with her son's child, but used magical powers granted to her by Hala to transfer the child to the girl she held prisoner in the woods. That girl then gave birth to the first Anis, the offspring of Lurin and her first son. The second son, a skilled farmer and woodsman, believed that his older brother had likewise run off. After waiting a year, supposedly to let Lurin mourn, he wed her, seduced by her great beauty. As they shared their bed on their wedding night, she revealed her true form and slew and devoured him. She had become pregnant with her son's child, but used magical powers granted to her by Hala to transfer the child to the girl she held prisoner in the woods. That girl then gave birth to the first green hag, the offspring of Lauren and her second son. The third son, a consummate fisherman, would have grown suspicious, but Lauren was smarter than he. She cloaked herself in yet another alluring female form and tricked the youngest son into believing his brother and his wife had both run off. She spent a year using illusionary beauty to seduce him into performing acts of unspeakable evil, and when he was no better than the beast she had enslaved in the forest, she shared his bed, revealed her true form, and devoured him. She had become pregnant with her son's child, but used magical powers granted to her by Hala to transfer the child to the girl she held prisoner in the woods. That girl then gave birth to the first sea hag, the offspring of Lurin and her third son. With her revenge complete, Lurin left the forest in the company of her 3 daughters, intending to bring doom to all men who let greed and lust guide their lives, and all who could be deceived by beauty that is only skin deep. Lurin left the young woman who had first stolen her husband with the evil forest creatures, letting them do with her as she pleased. First off, yikes. Second, if that's how it went down, that seems to have played poorly for Hala. Simeon added that there's a further legend among hags, that Lauren still walks the mist-swathed hills of our world, and if a hag successfully recognizes her as the first of their kind, Lauren will grant the hag powers almost as great as her own. I am sure this tale is appealing to hags that cast them in the role of avengers, carrying on the just revenge of a woman scorned. My belief, however, is that this is nothing but a fanciful myth. It has no basis in fact, but instead seems like the creation tales that so many races tell about themselves. Further, the prominent role the tale assigns of the goddess Hala in the creation of the hags is an element that the adherents of Hala, who became my friends as I worked on this book, find deeply offensive. This tale is not the primary source of hatred between witches and hags, but it is still a factor. When pressed, Simeon admitted that she does not believe the tale is literal truth, yet she nonetheless feels there is some truth to it, as elements of the story are echoed in a tale that is told both by the elves and ogres of Scythicus, a land south of Lochen and Invidia. She was the first to tell me the tale called The Ogress Lurine, although I have since also had it related to me by the Mason of Harthalen, a Scythican elf. There are several similarities between the Scythican myth and Simeon's tale, most prominently between Lurin and Lurhain, and the fact that the gods in both are blamed for the origin of hags. Here's the elven myth. A long time ago, during the time elves known as the Age of Dreams, ogres ruled the world. They built a civilization that only the elves have been able to equal in its glory, but as all evil beings will, they became lazy and complacent. Their great civilization began to crumble, and the other beings, the elves, the gnomes, the humans, that they had oppressed for so long were starting to rise up and struggle for freedom. Many ogres saw their civilizations was starting to fall, but few were willing to do anything about it. Too real, Van Richten. Many ogres, but in this environment of sloth, a powerful ogre sorceress named Lorhain began to spread her belief that ogres had accomplished too much. It was the will of the gods, Lurhain believed, that the ogres should abandon any effort to improve their lot in life. Many ogres started to follow Lurhain's doctrine, and soon no ogres were willing to attempt to work for a future of their kind. This angered the gods of evil. Even ogres, who had been working on plans that would have brought the race another 1,000 years of prosperity, fell sway to her. In the end, Lurhain hastened the fall of the ogres. To punish her, the gods scarred her face and twisted her body, turning her into the first Anis. Lurhain was horrified. She was cast out of the fairest of ogre cities, Kernin, because of her ugliness. She wandered from ogre city to ogre city, hoping to find an ogre mage powerful enough to lift the curse from her body. No such mage existed, but soon she was banished from every ogre city, town, and village on the continent. Lurhain gradually lost her mind. Initially, her madness was such that she attacked and killed every creature she came upon. However, her loneliness wore on her, and she took to keeping 1 or 2 of her victims alive. Soon these beings, humanoids most foul, joined in her madness. The children of these unions between Lurhain and her companions were always other hags. She never bore any sons, and none of her descendants have either. The anise arose from unions with ogres, the green hags from hobgoblins, and the sea hags from coalinths. I don't know, I'm like, that one doesn't add up. The similarities between the two tales should be similar to all readers. A female of some humanoid species was turned into a first hag by a powerful entity. Other hags sprang from her unions with unfortunate souls, in a fashion similar to the way hags procreate to these days. These similarities mere coincidences? There's a possibility that an actual historical event formed the basis of both tales. The elves of Scythicus are an insular people with a culture and language that resembles no others in the world that I am familiar with. It is unlikely that hags, despite the elven legend, seem to spring exclusively from unions between hags, and that humans could have ancient ties to Scythicus, unless the characters from Samine's tale were the civilized ogres from the elven tale, rather than being the humans that we assume them to be. Alas, the ever-shifting mists of time have long since hidden any event that may have been the source for these two similar tales. Fairy races. A type of being many consider to be legend, yet which is surprisingly common in the forests and waterways of Tepish and Darkon, is one some call the Fae, also known as fairies. Is it possible that hags are actually a form of fairy? I mean, it's possible. I don't know if it's likely. Anything's possible, Rudy. There's much we do not know about these rare and reclusive beings, but there are two important traits that scholars use to place beings in the fairy category. First, many fairy species exist only as male or female, reproducing either through magical rites or by mating with elves or humans or goblinoids. The resulting child is always a fairy and also of the same sex as the fairy parent. Hags always produce female offspring. Second, virtually all fairy species... Okay, first off, if hags always produce female offspring, why do you talk earlier about women who are barren being a sign for a woman who is a proto-hag, a hag who hasn't gone through the change? Fucking Rudolph Van Richten, you're spreading fucking fairy tales and folklore around that is internally inconsistent, and you're just making it dangerous for other people. I fucking swear. Second, virtually all fairy species have the ability to either alter their true shape or render themselves invisible. Are these abilities really so different from the hag's ability to cloak themselves in illusion and hide their hideous forms from the unwary? A lot of creatures can use illusions. It's you're making some jumps here. It seems far more reasonable a theory that hags are one of the little researched species of fairies. These would place them in the category shared by dryads, sirens, and nymphs, making them a species of female beings who propagate themselves by mating with males belonging to other species. I recognize that the limited amount of research that has been done into the nature of the Fae makes it exceedingly difficult to add or eliminate specific beings from this genus. Still, my examination of the hags has brought me to the conclusion that the hags are indeed one of the many different fairy species. My guess is that they hate the vast majority of other fairy creatures, most of whom possess unnatural beauty. Yeah, see, I feel like I'm not gonna say. I'm not gonna say that Van Richten believing hags are a species of the Fae makes me believe that they're not. But that is pretty much my thoughts on it. No, I don't. Yeah, and then 3 paragraphs later into the next section about birth and infancy. Not even 3 paragraphs, the first paragraph, he makes the comparison that I feel is much more natural, where they are they're like cuckoos. They're like cuckoos where they have their young raised by another species. Alright, well, that's my introduction to the introduction to hags. I'll probably come back and read some more of this later if people are interested. Yeah, I don't know. have a good night, everybody. Or afternoon. Or have an okay one. I don't know. I'm not your dad. Whatever. Bye.